Hello everyone. As I said in yesterday's video, there was a possibility that we could do a couple of smaller, shorter videos discussing a couple of big trades that have happened around the NHL. And today we're going to have one of those as the Boston Bruins and Washington Capitals completed a major trade in the NHL last night. We'll get to details coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Today I've got a huge trade to discuss, and that is a three-way trade between the Washington Capitals, the Boston Bruins, and the Minnesota Wild. So to start with, the Washington Capitals are going to get Craig Smith from the Boston Bruins, as well as a 2023 first-round pick, a 2024 third-round pick, and a 2025 second-round pick, all Boston's. The Boston Bruins will get forward Garnet Hathaway and defenseman Dmitry Orlov from the Washington Capitals, and prospect Andrei Svetlakov from the Minnesota Wild, and the Minnesota Wild get a 2023 fifth-round pick. Now, some of the details on this trade was the Minnesota Wild retained 25% of Dmitry Orlov's contract, and the Washington Capitals retained 50%. So the Capitals retained $2.55 million on his contract, and the Minnesota Wild retained $1.275 million on his contract. So instead of getting Orlov at a $5.1 million cap hit, the Bruins are getting him at a $1.275 million cap hit. So that's a pretty good deal. It's the second time in the last week that the Minnesota Wild have brokered a deal for other teams. They did one last week when the Maple Leafs acquired Ryan O'Reilly from the St. Louis Blues. They retained 25%, got a pick, and gave up a prospect to the Leafs in return. Same sort of thing for the Wild. They retained 25%, which isn't too much, but we can easily see that they're doing good, using their cap space to their advantage. So they retained 25%, which isn't too much. It's only about 1.3 million cap space for Minnesota. They do have to give up Svetlakov, who is a decent prospect. Probably doesn't have a future in the NHL, but we'll see. And they get a 2023 fifth-round pick. So the fifth-round pick is for this year. It's a really deep draft. So to have some more draft capital for this year is a really good move by the Minnesota Wild. They didn't have their third-round pick this year, so this pick now brings them up to 7 total picks this year. And I think this is a smart move by Minnesota. I think there's probably a couple of other teams out there. We've heard that Vancouver probably, as well as guys like the Chicago Blackhawks and the Arizona Coyotes, would be willing to broker this deal. But it's been quite interesting to see the Minnesota Wild jump in and retain 25% of O'Reilly and Orlov's salary to get a pick involved. So the Wild, to retain 25% of O'Reilly and Orlov's contract, have gotten a fifth-round pick in 2023 and a fourth-round pick in 2025 from the Maple Leafs and the Bruins. So good to see the Wild sort of broker these deals and get some draft picks in return. But the two big teams on this trade were Washington and Boston. Start with the Capitals. We talked about in our last video how they started falling in the standings. They started sounding like they would be sellers. Orlov was the guy who was getting most interest, and now he gets dealt. So not too surprised that he was dealt. It was really surprising, though, how quick he was. I mean, yesterday afternoon, there was some talk about him being scratched due to trade-related reasons, and then about 25-30 minutes later, he was already being shipped to Boston. So it happened really, really quickly. For the Capitals, this is a big and good trade for them. They're starting to fall off. They're now the lowest team in the playoff race. I mean, Sabres, the Wings have jumped them, and the Panthers, Isles, Penguins are all still ahead of them, so they have a lot of work to do. They don't have games in hand, and they have the lowest amount of points off any of these teams, so it's not looking good for Washington. So I'm not too surprised that they started selling off a couple of pieces. Orlov's a pretty good defender. Hathaway's a pretty good bottom six forward. So they get a first-round pick in this year's draft. Now, the way Boston's shaping up, even if they were to be eliminated like the first or second round, that pick is still probably going to be like 25, 26, 27. So I do not expect this to be a very high draft pick for the Washington Capitals, but it does give them some draft capital. It'd probably be more along the lines of a high second-round pick rather than a first-round pick. They get a third-round pick in next year's draft, so some more draft capital for next year, and a second-round pick in the 2025 draft. So they get a little bit more draft capital. I think this is really good for Washington. Now, the one thing I do think for Washington is they don't have defensemen signed past this year. The only one who is John Carlson, and they'll probably need some more supporting cast for Carlson next year. I mean, they have Feravari and Alexiev who are RFAs, but they still could use a couple of veteran forwards. So It would not surprise me in the least if the Caps use these assets either right now or possibly in the offseason to acquire a defenseman with some term on it. It would not surprise me at all. I definitely think the Caps are going to be looking for defensemen either now or in the offseason to play with Karlsson on that blue line. And I think using some of this draft capital, they could wind up trading it to acquire a defender. So I don't think that the Capitals may use all of these draft picks, but to get them is really good for Washington. As for the player who they acquired, they got Craig Smith, who we talked about yesterday, as well as possibly being a trade chip. He has not had a good season this year. He had 16 goals and 36 points in 74 games last year and did quite well, but this year only has 4 goals and 10 points in 42 games. So he hasn't really done well this year. So he goes to a Washington team who just traded away Hathaway and still has a little bit of injury troubles, like Mantha's still out, as we talked about yesterday. So I could see Smith slotting right into a third line and hopefully finding his production from last year. I still think Smith is a good player, but it just became a luxury the Bruins couldn't afford to have if they were going to add elsewhere. So for the Capitals, I think this is a pretty good deal. Orlov was a really good defenseman. There was some talk that he could sign an extension. Hathaway is a decent bomb six forward, but to move these two guys and get a first-round pick in return as well as a second and a third is great for the Washington Capitals. And I think that the Capitals might not be done yet, but now to the Bruins, where they get 3 players in this deal. To start with, Andrei Svetlakov is a prospect for the Minnesota Wild. He was drafted in the 6th round of 2017. He's still on the reserve list. He has not signed an NHL contract yet, and he's spent his entire career up to this point in the KHL. Last year he had an okay season, putting up 3 goals, 7 points in 28 games. But this year he's actually really done well, putting up 11 goals and 28 points in 66 KHL games. So I think it's possible Svetlakov could sign an ELC and be a possible NHL forward for the Bruins. I would not say it's a guarantee given the fact he was drafted a very long time ago in 2017. But we'll see. I think it's a possibility that Svetlakov could still wind up being a good bomb six forward in the NHL. But I'm just not saying it's a guarantee. So they get a decent prospect from Minnesota. But the 2 big pieces are Hathaway and Orlov. Hathaway, a decent bomb six forward, is a speedy winger, can help in the penalty kill, is a really good 4th line forward, and I think will just bolster that Bruins bottom 6. I think Hathaway is really good. Maybe placing him on a 4th line with a guy like a Thomas Nosek or a Trent Frederick or a Nick Foligno could possibly help the Bruins. I think their top 9 looks really good right now, so putting him on the 4th line and having him be a very productive bomb six forward will definitely help the Bruins. Not too much of a significant addition, but I definitely think the Hathaway addition is pretty big for the Boston Bruins. As for Orlov, this is the big piece of the deal. Orlov is a really good top 4 left shot defenseman. He could probably play with a guy like McAvoy or Brendan Carlo in that top 4 and do really well. He usually played on the second pair with Washington behind John Carlson, so I think it's quite possible he could be a really good addition for the Boston Bruins. He had 14 goals and 26 points in 76 games last year, but only has 9 goals and 16 points in 59 games in this year's season. So he hasn't been as productive offensively, but he is a good defensive-minded defenseman who definitely can put up offensive numbers. So I definitely do like the addition of Orlov. There was some talk earlier this week that the Boston Bruins had a deal in place for Vladislav Gavrikov, and that deal seems to have fallen through, so not sure what's going to happen with Gavrikov now. I don't see the Bruins trying to add another defenseman before the deadline, especially one that was costing like a 1st and a 3rd round pick, so it's going to be interesting to see where Gavrikov goes now that this deal has fallen through with the Boston Bruins. Some teams to probably watch out for would be the Edmonton Oilers, the LA Kings if they don't get Chychrun. I'm wondering if the Seattle Kraken or the Pittsburgh Penguins could possibly be an option as well. So definitely check on Gavrikov, as his trade status is now up in the air with this Boston Bruins deal falling through. But definitely, this is a good deal. I think for now, I think the Boston Bruins probably did win the deal. They get a top 4 left shot defenseman who's going to help them really much in this for this playoff run. A good bottom 6 forward who's definitely going to help their penalty kill and some offense, which they could easily use for this playoff run. They also get Svetlakov, who's a decent enough prospect for the Bruins. As for the Capitals, they get a lot of draft capital, 1st and 23, 2nd and 25, 3rd and 24. They also get Craig Smith, who, if they do wind up continuing to be sellers, I could possibly see them flip Craig Smith to another team. Like I said, Smith is pretty good, but that contract no one really wants. So if the Capitals were to retain half of his salary and drop it down to like a $1.55 million cap hit, I could see some teams being interested. So I would not say that it's a guarantee Smith is with the Capitals post-trade deadline, but I think it's definitely a likely possibility. And Smith, for the time being, I think will go on to the third line and play with the Washington Capitals. And then the Wild get a 2023 fifth-round pick from the Bruins for retaining 25% of the salary. So I think that the Bruins, for now at least, probably do win this deal, getting the best player in Orlov and having a couple of players who they can use in their playoff run right now. But I think Washington in the long run, depending on what they do with those picks and if they do use them, who they draft, could definitely say that the Washington Capitals in the future won this deal, and also what happens with Craig Smith. And I'll definitely not guarantee that the Boston Bruins did win this deal, but I think for the time being, Boston did win this deal. I think Washington did pretty good, moving a couple of pending unrestricted free agents for draft capital. I think that the Wild also did pretty good, once again using their cap space to get a draft pick. And I don't think any of these teams did done. I think the Wild's still looking for a scoring option. I know there's a lot of them saying that Minnesota's cap space is going with now retaining 25% of O'Reilly and Orlov's deals, but I still see them trying to add at least one forward. Whether it be a short-term or maybe a little bit more longer-term contract, I definitely see the Wild still trying to acquire a middle six forward. For the Bruins, not exactly sure if they do much more after this. I could see them maybe add one more depth piece, whether it be on the blue line or the forward group, but I would not expect too much more from the Boston Bruins. As for the Capitals, they continue to fall. There's very likely possibility that they continue to sell. Like I said, they have other players like Lars Eller, Connor Sheary, Trevor Van Riemsdyk, Nick Jensen. So there's a lot of other options there to possibly move before the deadline if they are going to be sellers. And I think there's still a possibility that the Caps do wind up selling a few more players. And if they were to get enough draft capital, maybe they go after the defenseman who signed on a long-term deal and could probably help them in the future. So definitely going to be interested to see. I would like to know what you think. Do the Bruins or the Capitals win this deal? And what more do you think these three teams could do before the trade deadline? So that's the trade I wanted to discuss today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.